Hey, welcome back to Evil's Comics. I'm Evil Mike, and I have reviews for you. Three in particular. This is going to be the end of DC's Fear State, the last three comics in the series. If you have not read these three comics, please do not continue forward. I get heavy into spoilers, that kind of stuff. I don't see it as spoilers. I'm reviewing a comic. The way I see it is, watch this please after you've read the comic, or if you're just interested in the comic. Always, I've been showing off, the art at the end of the review. If you're interested in, I will show art from all three books. I haven't done these where I've combined like more than one comic in one video, so I'm trying something new. This is kind of putting me behind, having to do like one video at a time. So hopefully this will catch me back up, because I am like super behind. These are actually comics. One of these is a comic that released last week, and the other two are comics that released like now 2 weeks ago. So technically, I mean, you've had a good enough amount of time to watch these. But without further ado, the three comics is going to be Batman Secret Files, The Gardener, it's going to be a Nightwing, and it's going to be a Batman 117. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we're the Secret Files, Batman the Gardener. It is basically like kind of like her origin story. I wouldn't say it's the origin story. All these are kind of set up where it's like a small version of their origin. You know, we've gotten Sean Mahoney's, we've got Miracle Molly, and now the Gardener. We got some others, Clown Hunter, Signal. Okay, but with this one specifically, it's just, it's telling the Gardener and how she got started. She was a scientist, like, that got into botany. She ended up working for this one guy who was revolutionary. I'm drawing a blank at his name, guys, I'm bad with names. But she starts working for this one guy who's revolutionary, changing the world kind of thing. And they're starting like their own kind of path and changing the world with plants and that kind of such. It gets to the point where they do meet a young another scientist, Pamela Isley, and she comes along, and at the time she has not turned into Poison Ivy yet in this story, and I don't know if this is tied to her original origin story. I'm not sure, but I do know parts of the origin story with Poison Ivy is accurate. But basically that they all three of them start working together eventually. I think it's William. William is the guy's name, but William and Pam, well, I'm just going to call him William for now. But William and the, Poison Ivy, Pamela specifically, they start working more closely versus with the Gardener. They kind of like leave her out of the loop, and eventually, like, with them two working together, that's where like he eventually kidnaps Poison Ivy and like experiments her, and like that's what changes her into Poison Ivy. And basically, she even states that it's the pheromone thing that we know that Poison Ivy has in the beginning, because now she's evolved. She's something completely different than what she was back then. So the Gardener is just telling her like that basically like after this happened and she saw what he did to Poison Ivy, she kind of stole some of his technology and mixed it with hers. And she basically, and she goes into like what she did, like what she does with it. But she basically like weaponized plants. She gave plants like anatomy and stuff like that, where she could like home grow monsters in days. Like basically, plant a seed and upgrows a a monster or something like that. So she does end up like starting to sell that to the military, and eventually she gets off persuaded on that. Maybe she gets rich off of it, and then she kind of stops. She didn't go into that, but eventually in this storyline, basically she's telling the whole thing is she's telling Batman a warning that she's not fond of capes and villains and that kind of stuff. That's why we've never seen her in Gotham, and she doesn't plan to stay. But basically she's just there to give Batman a warning that like if he doesn't like stop Gotham on its path, this and that, that she's gonna have to come back and like release all these like plant monsters kind of thing. She's also kind of like, she tells Poison Ivy's tale, and it kind of tells it in a different light, especially coming from a friend. And she kind of knows that Batman knows this too, because he's, ever since they've met, Batman and Poison Ivy, he's known that she's not really a villain. She just, maybe has a bad way of thinking sometimes. Um, so there's always been that cushion with Poison Ivy and Batman. The way he's treated her. It's kind of like Catwoman and those. So they're not necessarily like true villains. Um, so the story just continues in a lot of that fashion where, like the gardener is basically telling Batman her version of like, Pamela's progression through the years, like how she started out as Poison Ivy, then met Batman, then had kind of start doing different gimmicks trying to get past Batman. Basically, like the way she puts it, meeting this unstoppable force kind of thing, and it changed Pamela. But along the way, like, being locked up in Arkham and getting dissuaded and stuff like that, she got depressed and started to change in the more villainous path. Eventually meeting like Harley and bringing her back up, and then they took Harley back away from her when they put her in the Suicide Squad, so she went back down. So I mean, it's basically the gardener telling Batman that she's just misunderstood. We can still get her back. In a nutshell, that's kind of it. In the very end, just threatening Batman, like, hey, you got to stop Gotham in the way it's going, and you also have to like help Ivy get back to that innocent, because Ivy's getting to the point where she's basically the Green now, and that's kind of where this issue leaves off of. Next up, we have a Nightwing, and I am drawing a blank at the. If you can give me a second, it is Nightwing 86. I'm sorry. So we catch up with Nightwing, and Nightwing is really like solidifying like everything that's going on. If you've been reading everything in Fear State, including all the secret files, there's a lot that's been going on. We've had Peacemaker 1 running around causing havoc after getting drugged by Scarecrow, and Scarecrow doing the whole Fear State thing. The Seer in the background messing with the Oracle, the Clock Tower, basically all that. So what we're catching up with right now is the events that we've seen a couple different times, and it's just from a different angle. But what happened specifically to Stephanie Brown and Cassandra Cain, spoiler, and the other Batgirl. But and I hate saying that because they're both Batgirls, Barbara and Cassandra. But they kind of they basically start this out where like, all the Robins and Batgirl, that they're kind of freaked out because they saw the explosion after the magistrate shows up and basically destroys the clock tower and stuff, and them thinking that Stephanie and Cassandra were in the building. We've already seen it, they made it out and had like a whole little adventure after them. But we do see that eventually they do meet up, and they come up with the plan to finally kind of take out the magistrate. The magistrate's gotten too far, especially with Peacemaker running around. Currently, Batman handling Peacemaker, but right now in this specific, like in Nightwing, it's just about them taking down the floating tower that the magistrate and the Seer are using as their home base, and after they meet up with Stephanie and Cassandra, they come up with a plan, and it's this conversation of how they're going to get out there without being seen and that kind of stuff. And eventually they do figure out to steal some of the magistrates, like they're kind of like Metsuks because they all have like jetpacks. My new co-host. So we do have them eventually fly up there, infiltrate the magistrate. Once they get in there, the Seer automatically alerts the magistrate that they're there. The Seer has been waiting for them to get there. As far as they're concerned, they have no idea what Seer looks like, but they do get there. They fight like a slew of magistrate people, which they take out easily because now they have the tech suits plus their skills, and they do eventually kind of break off. Barbara and Nightwing head to the bridge, and they deal with Simon Saint, and the rest of them, they have to go deal with these kids that have been kidnapped as like an insurance policy kind of thing. It's really like the rich elite children that the magistrate they tricked them into believing there was a daycare, like a safe daycare in the floating tower kind of thing. Sorry. Coffee. So it eventually, like as they break off, the kids are saved. There is a scene that they do see the seer, because we, the readers, have seen what seer looks like, and she looks to be like a 12-year-old kid. Um, but she is mixed in with the slew of like kids that are supposed to be kidnapped. So they kind of like, they save all the kids. They get them to these like emergency escape pods and stuff. And Seer's one of the kids that they put in there, and she goes on her merry way. Barbara and Dick, they end up making it to the bridge. They take out Simon with, I mean, basically, bloop, and he knocks over. After that, they start looking for the seer, and all they find is like a USB drive that she has left behind. Them thinking that she left long time ago, not knowing that she was in the kit, mixed in with the kids kind of thing. The very end, they do smash the floating fortress into the Gotham Harbor, and destroy it so it can't like take off again, something like that, stating that Nightwing's gonna have to spend some of his bajillions on cleaning it up, stuff like that. And that's kind of where this issue leaves off, basically with them showing that Seer basically escapes, and we don't know what that has in plan. I mean, at the very end, Barbara's kind of mad. There's this like heated conversation that she was really pissed that someone on a technological level was able to not only dupe her, steal her technology, and then just vanish. So in my opinion, I'm really digging Seer. I mean, she kind of duped the whole Bat family. Of course, Batman was not there, but still the whole Bat family like checked her and sent her on her merry way. But that's basically where this issue leaves off of. But last but not least, we have Batman 117. And 117 is also it happens concluding all this. They do have where the Bat family is up on the on the flying fortress as they're crashing it into the harbor. But more importantly, it's what's going on with specifically Queen Ivy and Harley and Catwoman and them, and then the other story with Peacemaker and Scarecrow, Molly, and Batman. Scarecrow had just been, shot for dead in the last issue by Peacemaker. So now Batman and Peacemaker are just in an all-out brawl, and it does not disappoint. You talk about the ending of a story that I want is right here, because it goes. I mean, it's just phenomenal. I mean, like you talk about like already Peacemaker is beefed up. Now he's got this whole like. This like where all this fear and everything has been lifted, and he's supposed to be this like ultimate version of a person or whatever, and he's fighting Batman, and the fight is not like one-sided at any time until the end of the fight, when the victor rises victorious. But I mean, it's a back and forth, and Peacemaker's still having his energy weapon, and Batman at this point kind of all cut up and torn to shreds. I mean, this campaign has not stopped since it started, kind of thing. But they jump back over to Queen Ivy, Harley, Catwoman, and that group, and basically, it's Harley bringing the pure version of Ivy. And they basically explain, and it kind of ties into the secret file issue. They show you at the very end that when Gardner was noticing that Ivy was on her path, kind of to like a more villainous path, she kind of like broke off a piece of her at one point, so she could make like a seed just in case, if she needed to, in case Ivy died or something like that. And with her ability of like growing monsters kind of thing, like, I mean, and using that other guy, I think his name is William, is what I was calling him, but basically using a mix of her and they, she has created this perfect Ivy, and that's where this Ivy that sprouted up in Alley Town came from, was at the Gardner. She was homegrown, someone kidnapped her, and they just lost, the Gardner lost where she was. Now finally, after being rescued by Catwoman, the Gardner, and Harley Quinn, they're bringing back the pure Ivy to Ivy, and they're kind of explaining, look, you're wonderful, you're great, and everything, you're powerful, but you're kind of missing something, and we all remember this other version of you. And then they bring in kind of pure Ivy, and eventually they do go, like talk to her and get her to accept that she needs to be whole again, kind of thing, and she does do so willingly, no fight or anything, and we do see, and I'm gonna kind of dub it the pure Ivy. Now she is like both sides of the coin with her like Queen Ivy status and the pure that was there. I'm going to break back over because what happens next with Queen Ivy and what she does is pretty much the end of Fear State. But we break back over to Batman and what's going on with Molly and Scarecrow and this and that. Molly is busy trying to like decode, and disarm what Scarecrow had in place. Basically, he was going to erase everybody's like, fears, and basically like that was kind of the whole point of Fear State, using like Mad Hatter technology and his new version of the fear toxin, basically. But that he was going to like, basically scare everybody half to death and then wake everybody up so they came out like super strong. That was his idea. So Molly's over there like decoding, trying to like disarm it, while we do find out the Scarecrow is still alive, and he basically starts trying to like villain rant Molly, and eventually she has to knock him out. Batman, during the whole campaign back and forth, eventually does take out Peacemaker, and like badass style, using his utility belt like as a kind of like boxing glove kind of. Yeah, he puts like a bunch of hard stuff in front of it. But at this point, it's just Mahoney. All of his armor has fallen off. He just has the energy blade, and that's about it. And it's just attached to his arm, kind of thing. But eventually, Batman does take out Peacemaker, and at this time, we do see that Molly does, stop everything. And she disarms the Scarecrow bomb, let's just say, and she has a brief moment, and Scarecrow starts telling her this, like, hey, you have this opportunity, and she goes back to what the Insanity Collective was about, and they were going to use the same machine to wipe everybody's like imperfections, not like reset them, but basically reset them in a good way, get rid of their insecurities, get rid of their imperfections, like on a mental status kind of thing. And she has this huge dilemma on whether to go ahead with that plan. Jump back over to Ivy, and when Ivy becomes Queen Ivy, she basically like she realized what's going on. All her feelers all of a sudden can see all of Gotham, and she sees all this war and fear and everything. She can feel it in the air, and basically she releases like these plants that go up all over Gotham, and they spread this pheromone that it cools everybody down. It brings their anger and heat, basically bringing them into a very peaceful mood where everybody starts fighting. Everybody kind of starts like going. It goes back to where they're like, "What am I doing? Oh my God!" kind of thing. But not only that, there are some people that were specifically inflicted during like when the magistrate had broke into the hidey hole that the Ivy was hiding in, and some of the Insanity Collective. They're the ones that are injured. So Ivy does. She does show us that she has the ability to just heal, gaping wounds kind of thing, using, and it's all like botany related on how they, the power of plants kind of thing. But basically, Ivy stops the Fear State. She just basically, like, there's massive. It just turns Gotham into like a grown forest all of a sudden, and it's just these beautiful blossom plants that show up all over Gotham. So on the other side, with Batman and Molly and still going through it, but they have defeated Peacemaker. Molly's facing that decision of wiping everybody and trying to fix the Fear State thing. It's the only, kind of possible outcome that she has seen. And Batman instantly tries and stops her. He grabs her like feed, because she's literally about to, feed the hardline from the Scarecrow device into her so she can react the Insanity Collective protocol thing. And Batman's like, no, before you do that, he was like, man, jack up to my cow. And he's like, no jokes, no tricks. He was like, hack up to my cow and look at Gotham. He was like, I have like, my sights all over Gotham. He was like, take a look at this. And he was like, before you do that, I'm not trying to stop you. So Molly does take the Jack, and she uplinks, and she sees that I mean, Fear State's already over. That if she would have done that, it would have been for no reason other than her own, selfish reason. Um, and basically, Batman talks her down. There is this huge moment where it seems like, it could have gone either way, where we almost got like a full blown version of supervillain Miracle Molly. But Batman was able to talk her down. Basically, he was like, "Hey, do you remember how I brought up the crooks or cowardly lots kind of thing?" He was like that just means they're human, and humans have faults, and that kind of thing. He was like, and that's why we never take that ultimate step, because there's always a step back, or a talking down. There's always another way around stuff. And that's where this issue leaves off. And all three of these, they have an ongoing Batgirl story that's leading up to the Batgirl, storyline that is coming out in December. And that all three backstories are phenomenal. Every issue, I've loved the Batgirl side story. It's actually been one of my favorite side stories, and there has been a lot of good side stories, especially the Justice League Dark, the Punchline. But man, oh man, if this isn't my favorite, story, the art, the where it's leading. But basically, it looks like Seer is heading to the Batgirl storyline, because all that happens in the Batgirl storyline is kind of what's going on with what happened at the clock tower, what happened to Stephanie and Cassandra as they were trying to make it away from the clock tower, and eventually them recouping up with the Bat family at the end of Fear State. So that's kind of all that was. But at the very end of this, it does set up a brand new villain that we have not seen. They have shown like Easter eggs during the comic of somebody that's been spreading graffiti, and at the same time we've been hearing these reports of a serial killer going around using art mixed with killing, them hinting that this is the same person. And eventually at the very end of this Batgirl story, they do show us that the graffiti artist turn around, and he does look very villainous. He looks pretty dope, like a technological like Skeletor mixed with like a hooded, I don't know, it's really weird. In my opinion, he looks pretty cool. But every time we saw him, he was turned around graffitiing and stuff. And the second you do see him turn around, you're like, oh yeah, that's probably the villain. Probably the serial killer that's killing people and stuff. But he has been popping up in a lot of the Fear State stuff, and most people, for the most part, we just haven't been paying attention to him, kind of thing. But the other part that they're setting up is this here is heading to, the Batgirl comic specifically. And that's kind of all that's set up in the Batgirl storyline. That's where we're heading with that series. So that's my review, and our review in total. I loved Fear State, and I know a lot of people that it was half or didn't like it. City of Bane, Joker War, Fear State, in my honest opinion, were awesome storylines all the way through. All the tie-ins, like there's not one part of the stories I didn't like. There's not things I wouldn't change. The art has been amazing. The ride has just been stellar. The conclusion to the story is not a letdown at all. It was really good to get to I was so excited to get to Batman 117, and I still feel like that, that we might get a little more of what's going on, because I don't know if they touched on what Hugo was doing and a couple other like keepsakes, so I'm hoping Harley touches base with that. But I'll show you some of the art and let you get on your way. I know this was long. And I'm going to start it off with back in the Secret Files with, and I hope I'm going the right way. Yes, I am. Alright. But the art in Secret Files was beyond amazing. It was basically like an art read, because the whole story was her telling, here's one of those monster plants that she created. But basically, it's just a recreation, telling the retelling of Pamela Isley and like her origin story and her meeting Batman, and just in a different fashion. Ooh, yeah. But it had some amazing art, especially for like a side, a side story that was kind of just like an origin story, especially because there wasn't a lot to, and this was the threat scene. Alright, so then we got, this is Nightwing, and this is the beginning of the Nightwing with the clock tower blowing up, them looking for, Stephanie, and, oop, come on. Now it didn't want to focus. Come on, man. There we go. Sorry, guys. I don't know what my camera was doing. There's some of the Oracle, like how she looked. This is basically them infiltrating, the magistrate's flying fortress. The scenes where the seer is talking to them. That's the seer right there when they save her. That's the fortress crashing into the bay. The seer getting away. This is Batman 117, and them touching base on what's happened and everything else. That's them infiltrating the magistrate headquarters. The fight between Batman and Peacemaker 1, Sean Mahoney. Miracle Molly trying to disarm while Scarecrow is trying to villain talk her way down. Some epic fights. We got Pure Ivy right there after she has been reconnected. I kind of passed over it, but right here is where they reconnect. And that is all the blossoms and the flowers that they spread over Gotham. Finally, Ivy and Harley together again. Batman beating the hell out of Sean Mahoney. Look at that! Just pow! Batman kind of finally getting to take a breather and talking down Molly. Batman, the bat signal finally in the sky after months. It's been since City of Bane. And that's where we leave it off of, just this. And it says, around the world and back again is all it says at the very end. But guys, that's my review. I hope you have a good one. If you don't feel inclined, like, subscribe, comment. Please comment. And I will see y'all soon. Bye, guys.